This is a Tyco Rock Island Sharknose, and today I'm going to be restoring it. Alright, before we get started repairing this thing, let me give this thing a test run. By the way, this is full power. It seems sluggish and it seems to be slipping. I did take a look earlier and it looks like the traction tires are dry rotted, so that might be part of it. But overall, it seems like it'll still need a whole bunch of work either way to get it to run well. Now let me start taking this thing apart. I think first I'm just going to start with the real basics of this rear truck. That's something I'm going to have to glue on. But these rear trucks, there's really not much going on here. So all I'm going to do with this truck is I just want to unscrew this. And I want to give all the components in here just a very basic clean out. And I'm going to start with the just truck assembly itself. And now I'll move on to the cover and the wheels. Alright, before we put this whole thing back together, I'll address the side frame situation here. On this side, I'm probably just going to glue this one back on. However, on this side, it's in quite rough shape, so I'm just going to leave it without a side frame, since I don't really intend on keeping this engine for quite a while. So I'm just going to glue this side frame, and then I will come back once that's gluing, because I don't think that's really an important step to show all of you. Alright, so off camera, I have glued this truck cover back on, I have installed a new horn hook coupler, and we've got all the wheels in, so now all that's left to do is stick this truck right back into here. And now we can move on to the front of this engine. Just to make my life easier, I'm going to wrestle with this thing and get it out of the way, and we will come back and start tearing apart this motor block. Alright, so now it's time to tear into this thing and get everything apart. Alright, so as you can tell, this block is quite a bit of a mess, and just so it makes me less of a mess, I'm going to clean this off first before going in and cleaning out the brush plate and commutator. Alright, I know that's not going to be perfect, but I'm going to come back and clean that out a little bit more later. But now I believe it's time to get this brush plate off. Alright, let's see if I can fish these springs out of here without throwing the screwdriver on the floor. Alright, there we are. Both these springs do look like they are in pretty good shape. They are compressed just a tiny bit, but they are perfectly usable. And the brushes also look like they're in pretty good shape, so I'm just going to give this all a pretty thorough cleaning. I'll use some rubbing alcohol after I go in and I clean this thing off with the fiberglass pencil. All right, I think everything in that motor block's pretty thoroughly cleaned out. Next up I have the brushes, and then we can put this thing back together. All right, now it's time to put this whole motor plate assembly back together. And if I can find where it went, I do actually have a tool to do this. It looks pretty worn out, but this tool does actually work quite well. This is just this little piece of styrene that I made up, and it allows me to slide it in right here, just like this, protecting this brush cover plate, which needs to go in just like that. And then I can just slide this thing out once I've screwed it in, and the brushes and springs should, in theory, stay in place. But to do this, I need to grab both of these springs and then stick the brushes on top of them. All right, this process is usually fairly difficult like that. So I'm just going to screw this in with one screw, then I'm going to cut the clip, and then I will test this thing off camera to see if this actually works and I got everything in the correct way. All right, I've given it a very brief test off camera, and the thing does run. As you saw, this is fairly difficult to get right and takes quite a bit of time. So it's a little bit of an annoying process to film, but I guess it turned out half decently. Now this part here, I have no clue what it's for, but it appears to go in right about here, just like that. So all I'm going to do is put that right in the way it came in. So I don't know if something's wrong here. I will probably go back to this later, but I don't really see anything that this copper piece is doing. Okay, I'm just going to put it in like that. I don't see any other way that this thing would go, and it doesn't seem like it really does anything. I could probably go back and check my recording from when I started filming this, but for now, I'm just going to leave it like this because I really don't see anything that this part is doing. Alright, before we get into cleaning off all the gears and whatnot, I'm just going to give the motor bearings just a little bit of oil so I don't forget to do this later. And now we can tackle these messy gears and whatnot. Alright, before we go putting this back together, I'm going to clean up just a little bit, and we're going to deal with the traction tires on these two axles when I come back. Alright, so as you can see, I have a bit of a mess here. I just tried to clear off all of the traction tires, and they're all dry rotted. So what I'm going to be doing is replacing them with these dental bands. I have a whole video on this and the dental bands that I have actually bought, but the biggest issue with these is trying to get the bands to go on smoothly. Because if you look closely sometimes, and I don't think it did it for this one, they can go on a little bit rough. That one actually looks like it went on pretty well first try. And those both look like they went on pretty well. So now I believe all I've got left to do is give this block some fresh oil, put these gears into place, and then just put this whole front truck assembly back together. Alright, before we're completely done, I've got to slide this piece back on here, and then I've got one more little small thing I want to do before we go test this thing out. Alright, what I was going to do, I decided against. On a lot of these things, I will put neodymium magnets on each end of the block. However, since I don't plan on keeping this engine around very long, that's not something I think I'll do and waste magnets on. I do it on all the Tycos I keep, and since I'm probably going to be getting rid of this one, this is not going to be one of those engines. So I believe all I've got left to do is that, and then we can go test this thing out, see if it runs. Now, after all that work, let's see if this thing will run. So I'll give the thing about half power. Seems a little slow. I'll bring it back. I know you probably can't hear it because of my microphone, but this thing's actually running really quietly. It might just need to work in a little bit because it still seems a little sluggish, but once I give it a higher power, this is at about 80%, it's running perfectly fine. I'll let this thing do another lap. Hopefully nothing terribly goes wrong. The light on this thing doesn't seem to be working, but I don't recall it working either when I first got the thing. Plus, again, I'm not keeping this thing around all that much. So I think for this engine, I would consider this a success. Before I close out the video, I just wanted to mention that this was actually a new camera setup for me. I'm hoping this turned out well and better than a lot of other stuff, but we'll see. And after all that, if you stuck around, thank you for watching.